well-being and the job demands and the job resources to our, that we can really use our personal resources. I think now more than ever, I'm going to use the Afrikaans word, die tierlantjies is verby. We really know what is very important, and well-being, that focus, that point of departure, helping us to focus in a dedicated way. And also, as we're reading in the book, this finding the balance, and be careful of the spillover effect. So well-being, this life-giving energy that is really part of us, of being a human being. And then for that, I want to connect it with Gergen. He talks about that human beings we are relational beings. So central to well-being for me is relational well-being, and with that, our ability to connect with others, of course in the workplace, but then also wherever we are. And I think, again, in South African setting, this is so beautiful. Here in the Cape, I mean, we know about Cape Townian sayings and the jokes, that's distinctive jokes, and is how we can connect. And a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. But again, when we talk about the relational interaction, it is the quality of our connecting. And I think this over and over in the book, we find this as well. And I really love this. So also, wherever we are, like this afternoon, even if it's not possible to have the physical connection, but that we can have this quality of connecting, and we know it's important and it's powerful, and also a way of investing in our personal well-being, our family, the workplace community. And then another word that I know the concept is not maybe written in the book, but I think we can create it ourselves, and I call it collective mattering. In the sense of, and it's Prelentensky, he's a community psychologist, he used this term, that he talks about mattering, and that I know I matter, and therefore I know that my contribution is valuable. So this is central for me. That is a sense, as I was reading the book and rereading and enjoying it, and the honesty, all the authors writing with such honesty from a personal experience about well-being, is this collective mattering, that we know we are taking hands. And I really think this is such a wonderful contribution of the book, that I am taking hands with a fellow person, a fellow South African. And also, as you've explained now, the various chapters, valuable, really choosing life, the wounded healer, paying it forward with kindness. The stories we tell about our emotions. It is really, you were saying about cooking with a friend, so it's this genoeg, it is the enough, putting it all together and having a wonderful, wonderful collective energy. And I really think this collective energy then gives us a book. And I was thinking, and I'm using the word exploding with our personal stories. And again, in our context, so many times stories of resilience, that in spite of, how to overcome, how to deal in a constructive way, to manage. And then, of course, this also implies the honest sharing of our vulnerabilities. And this is so important for me, that well-being is not just, yay, I made it. So many times yes, but facing my vulnerabilities, or in the workplace, or my family, but to know it is possible. It's possible to say, this is a best day, this is a best experience, and to enjoy it with gratitude. And then I would like to say, this book, it's like an open invitation where we invite the reader, please be part of this boosting process. I think the word boost is so important, because, and Erika, we've discussed it how many times with your study as well, that well-being is never a stable process, or it's that it's growing. It's like therefore the gardening is so important. We need the continuous sessions of boosting, and therefore one another and our interaction, like this afternoon, and also that I can take this book, that I can share, that I can enjoy the valuable insights, the lessons, the acts of kindness. And as the one author said, a main source of well-being is a husband, because he adores her. That it's again, as we say, it's the everyday, it's the daily experiences that's so important for our well-being. And then finally, I think boosting workplace well-being, it's a magnificent, purely South African experience, and it's much more than just what maybe the words are offering us. So I want to invite, on behalf of all the authors and our brilliant editor, Erika, become a partaker of this journey of well-being in our country, because I think now more than ever, we've got a wonderful opportunity to become a living example of well-being, being well. And yes, I want to salute all our authors, Erika, because this is inspirational work and it's compiled with abundant love. Thank you.
Isanet, thank you. What a loving talk, what an inspirational talk. I hope that all of you got something that you can hold on to from Isanet's words. Next, I'd like to introduce you to Ellie Dykema. Ellie, thank you very much for addressing us on your ideas about well-being.
Good afternoon, Erika. Good afternoon, friends, colleagues, and guests. I'm Ellie. Erika, like Isanet said, asked us to introduce ourselves. So I'm a psychologist. I'm also one of the contributing authors of this beautiful book, Boosting Workplace Wellbeing. And what an honor it is to speak today and to just talk to you a little bit about my experiences of the book and to just share some of my thoughts. So thank you for the opportunity. I'm going to tell a story today, and the story that I'm going to tell relates to what I speak about in the book. So in the book, I speak about work as a gift, because in my life, I often see it as a gift. I very much enjoy what I do to such an extent that sometimes it becomes a problem. So it can often becomes all-consuming. And I think it doesn't matter what you do. For some of us, we don't necessarily love our work to such an extent, but we all have to work. And it tends to overflow into a lot of spaces. And like I say, it often becomes all-consuming. Now, whether you are a psychologist or an architect or a dentist, a writer, a waitress, doesn't matter what you do, sometimes work just becomes too much. So the story that I want to tell today relates to my mother. So her work was to raise 4 children. So yes, we are 4 children, and she raised all of us. She was a nurse, and she then decided to raise the 4 of us. So she worked incredibly hard. Colleagues, friends, if there's something that lockdown taught me, is that being a mother is an incredibly hard job. Now, I only have 1, she had 4. So she worked incredibly hard in her life, and I will always be thankful for that. I saw that growing up, the hours that she put in. My mom had a friend. This friend was called Joni. Now, Joni was an incredible woman. Friends, if you looked at that woman, you could see that she ran her life. She was a woman that she almost had a glow about her. And it was one of those people that you want to be friends with. You want to be friends with that person. And she was one of my mother's friends. So I still remember to this day, my mom came to pick me up. I was still in high school. And she said to me, "You will not believe what Joni told me today." Now, Joni also had 3 children, and she had a part-time job. So she worked incredibly hard. So my mom said to me, "Joni told me today that some days she comes to school, she drops off the kids, she goes back home and she gets into bed and she watches movies for the whole day. When her husband comes home for lunch, she doesn't make lunch. She tells him to go and make a sandwich. And then she also tells him to go and pick up the kids because she's still in bed. And then when the kids arrive back home, they get in bed with her and they continue to watch movies for the rest of the day. At night, they would just have takeout. So my mom looked at me like this. Isn't that crazy? I remember up to today how I admired that woman, and I envied her that she could take the time and realized when she needed a day like that. And it obviously worked for her because she was functioning incredibly well. And up to today, it had an impact on me, and I still remember that story so clearly. Friends, colleagues, I am proud to say today that after a lot of trial and error in my career, working for a lot of years, I have become my mother, who works very hard, and of that I'm very proud of. But I've also become a woman who knows to, when I need a day like that, when I need a day where I just watch movies for the entire day, or like I said in the book, I used a quote, anonymous quote, which says, some days you eat salad and you go to the gym, because that's also work for some people. And some days you eat cupcakes and you refuse to put on pants. And I think it's important for us to realize when we need that day and for us to take that. Friends, guests, for me, workplace well-being is so very closely linked to home life well-being and to personal well-being. And that is what I speak about in the chapter that I wrote. So I hope that if you do decide to buy the book, I hope that you will enjoy it, and I hope that you will get value from it. Thank you, Erika.
Ellie, thank you so much. You remind me when you speak of an integrated life, of understanding what it's like to still have fun, to be dedicated, to do your work, to be a professional person, but two, that you are able to know when to switch off and that you can find that button. And in our book, we speak many times of finding that switch off button to continue to be well for yourself and for those people that you love. Next, I please want to ask Alec Bale to talk to us about your ideas about well-being and share that with us, please, Alec.
So, hello everyone. I'm so happy that all of you can make this, and I'm really happy to be here myself. And when I looked at the book, I thought to myself, well-being, should we break up the word it's well and then being? Should we use this together? And I think to myself, sometimes I don't really feel very well. I feel really like I've caught my own tail, and hence my story about a tale of two tales. When I look at everything that I've written a few years ago, I think it was about 2 years when we wrote this specific piece, and I look back and then I thought, I've got to be crazy to be running around like this, chasing my own tail all the time. But today, when I look back, I think I have grown. I got to well-being. Sometimes it's not really that well, and sometimes I'm just a being and just being. But then I also looked at the other authors in the book, and a specific part that Rula wrote caught my eye as well. And it says, I'm still learning to say no to work. And it says, I'm still learning to say yes to trust in the moment. And I thought to myself, all these stories, it could have been our stories. We share a different golden or the same golden thread through all of these stories. And that is part of well-being as well, our support, and being able to actually look back at our journey and proceed on our journey forthwith, because we have had a journey and we're looking forward to another journey. There's constant growth, and as Annette also said, we're resilient, we bounce back, and it's also, we need to be able to keep on bouncing, to have that inner happiness and inner peace. Some days we're going to be flat on the ground. We're going to be sitting on the carpet. We want to sit in a corner. We'll pull the blankets over our heads and feel, I cannot do this. But to get up there, that's the bouncing back. It's the feel good of just being. And some of our spaces do eventually encroach. My work becomes my home environment. My home environment becomes my work. And where do you draw the lines? That is sometimes very difficult. And I think if we just keep on trying to stick the word well with the word being, we're actually going to get there. And we need to sometimes, in order to move forward, we've got to look back. And in order to look back, we've got to move forward. So for me, it was a feeling of just being able to stick the whole word together, to keep on bouncing back, and to be able to put the well with the being and have well-being.
Alet, wow, what an incredible take on well-being, and helping us understand one more time that we are human beings and not human doings. And that flexibility and that bouncing back, that's exactly what we speak about when we speak about resilience, the ability to look forward, the ability to pick yourself up, not pretending that when we have well-being, life doesn't happen and we have the happiest, best life and no accidents ever happen, no bad things happen in the workplace or in our private lives. So thank you so, so much for sharing that. So next, I want us to listen to Rula and to her ideas about well-being that she wants to share. Thank you, Rula.
Hello, everybody. So, yes, thank you and all of that. And it's a wonderful book. And thank you for everybody who can attend. So I also want to tell 2 stories. Thank you, Adelaide, for that quote that you referred to, because I think that actually says sort of an aspect that I think is very important of well-being. So to introduce myself, I would say I'm a writer, I'm a lecturer, I'm a storyteller, I'm a student, still battling with the PhD, but also loving it. I'm a strategist, I'm a cook, and I'm a bottle washer and a gardener. And so I've tried to make a few notes, so bear with me. So as Ilse net spoke of Seligman, who speaks of the gratifications, I thought, when I read that, I'm like, yes, that's exactly it. What are the things that make me forget myself? Where I feel I'm not aware of how I look or how I sound. And those normally are when I tell a story and when I teach. And what really gives me a kick is when because the stories are always too long-winded, as all my students know, and they do not fit into the pattern of 10 ways to make a strategy. But that, in Afrikaans, the word is onsamehangend. That mode of telling story is often the way I experience life and the way I experience well-being. It's not a set pattern. It's something that you have to create as it happens. Look at the synchronicity of stuff that happens in your life and try and weave those together. So and Erika puts it so really nicely. I just must find that quote. She speaks of, of course, she has that quote of Robert Kennedy of how do we measure that which is truly worthwhile. And I think we measure it in spoons full of sugar. And this is where the first story comes in. So the first story is about Sasavona, who's a domestic worker and who works for us, and who has taught me so much about how to be in the moment and how to use what you have, how to make biryani from scratch. And the story she told me years ago was when she was very young and she and her mother lived in a shack and they didn't have tea. So what her mother would do when she was young is she would take a spoonful of sugar and heat it over the candle so that the sugar caramelizes. And then she would mix that into a cup of hot water and they would call it tea. And for me, that is I think the gem of well-being is, what do you call it? what do you do, how do you reframe that, whether it's a negative or a positive, in order for it to become a good story? And that relates to my husband, who's an artist and who makes the most amazing jewelry. And he, a few years ago, started collecting what he calls parking lot pulls. And I'm wearing that. So it's you know, rusted beer tops that you can find everywhere by the sea. And for a bit we didn't, but now we will again. So he calls these rusted beer tops that don't actually have a use anymore. He calls them parking lot pulls. And I think that's that same sense of finding bits of your life, detail of your life, and weaving it together to make a narrative, to make a story, and I completely agree with Elzanet. It's not perfect. It's not always pretty, but your ability to name it something, and then to choose the positive energy of that, I think that is for me what well-being is. And of course, this relates to what Ben Oakry says. We are born from stories, and we are born into story. And the moment when I forget everything of myself is when I'm able to tell a story of when a student, or when somebody, especially somebody that you didn't expect, would come up with this gem, this parking lot pull, and you suddenly realize that well-being does not rely on money, on outside things. It's your ability to reframe and to relook. And like Rico says, to take the detail of our lives and weave them together in narrative. So that's where I find my well-being. And then I absolutely loved what Ellie said. I have received a gift, I will do the work. So whatever the gift is, if the gift is to reframe things, if the gift is to invite conversation, whatever your gift is, do the work. And from there will the well-being come, I believe. So I hope you guys enjoy the book, and I thank Erika and everybody who's participated in this book, because I really enjoy being part of this positive psychology book. Thank you.
Rula, thank you so much. When Rula speaks to us, she definitely addresses something that we all as authors speak about in the book, and that is, where does your wealth come from? So do you recall the last time you got a promotion, or you got a hike in the money you earn in a month, or your business started doing better, or you got a great new deal, whatever it is that your business or your work comprises of? Do you remember how long it took for that wonderful feeling to wear off? So where does our wealth come from? And if it's not generated outside of money and those things, then what happens if you are demoted, for instance, or if you earn less? Where does that take your well-being? So we address really difficult things like this in our book as well. I'd like Olga Rousseau to please speak to us now about well-being and the paths you've walked in terms of your own well-being and what you want to share with our guests. Thank you, Olga.
Good afternoon, Erika and fellow authors. Firstly, I want to thank you to having been part of this book and the small contribution that I could do. It was a privilege, Erika, and for all your hard work. I really do hope it sells well and that people will enjoy it. A bit of background, I'm a dietitian and I've been in private practice. I won't say for how long, because then I'll give my age away. But I don't mind, because you're as old as you want to be in your mind. My well-being, I said in the book as well, or as a person, I think, is being able to get up every morning and I can't wait to start the day. Because the challenges that lie ahead every single day, working with people, which actually bring out sometimes the worst and the best in you. but each and every person is a challenge. And I see my job as looking at a person saying, what can we do to get you to optimum health? Optimum health, optimum well-being is not only what you eat, you are what you eat, but optimum health is to feel vibrant, to sleep well, to have energy, to not be depressed. And it all has to do with what you eat. But I often find in my work that you sit with people and they come and they feel they're a failure. They've been a failure in so many ways, especially when it comes to dieting. And then your treatment starts by motivating that person, and I think to start believing in himself. And part of the well-being that I feel that I get from my job is when you see a person changing in front of you from one week to the other, from being despondent, being in despair, feeling a failure. I've tried everything and nothing works, where they actually come out and they thrive. They've got a new outlook on life. And that is the biggest satisfaction, to see what you can contribute and give to another person without really doing drastic things. Often it's just to sit and listen, because you find that we are all rushing. We very seldom have time to listen to people. And I find in my practice as well that you often get a person that comes to you with, I'm using an example, a weight problem, and through listening and talking, they open up and they talk to you, and you find that they've got other problems. I think that's the biggest feeling, to see somebody in front of you and you notice that they have faith in you. They can open up, they can trust you. And I think that gives you the most wonderful feeling of job satisfaction. I'm worthy of something. And as Dr. van Skalkwyk said, my vulnerabilities. I sometimes feel I failed. And then I might, in 2 or 3 weeks' time, see this patient again or see this client and to say, Olga, you know what, you mentioned something the first meeting and it stuck with me and I could build on that. And then you realize we all have our ups, we all have our downs. Some days I walk out of my office and I feel, what a great day. And sometimes I walk out and I feel, I could have done something different, but that's life. But you never lie down and you learn from your mistakes. And you mentioned something, Ellie, about your mom's friend that you had, where she gave the children, or she got to bed and they watched TV or they watched movies the whole day. And that's what I often say to people, that each and every day is different. And when it comes to eating healthily and for your well-being, you can't do it 100% every day. Not one of us can do it 100%. It'll be 90% one day and it'll be 10% another day. But you will get there, step by step, little baby steps at a time. And in the book, I also said that, and you mentioned it, Erica, where I often look back in my practice and I think, you know, I sometimes think, but boy, did I have an income this month, that it's not important. You get so involved in your job and what you're getting from, and that's work well-being. Getting back to the friend that you can't be perfect. I had a very great friend, and she used to say to her children when they came to her on a Sunday evening, Mom, we're hungry. Go and have a look, there's cornflakes in the cupboard. So that's fine, it's only one evening, but tomorrow night you'll have a balanced meal. So I think general well-being in your workplace is not only what you put in, but what you get out of each and every client that you see. And we're never too old to learn. Every single day, I learn something from other people. And I think I'm grateful at the end of the day for what I've got if I listen to other people. I hope you enjoy the book, and there's so much to learn from it. Thank you, Erica.
Olga, thank you so much. If there are any people from business, or you have your own business enterprise, or you are entrepreneur, I want to encourage you, if you're looking at the well-being or the productivity of the people who work for you, please consider to give them this book as a gift. It really, really changes people. I've recently had somebody who said, I thought of reading a chapter a day. But then when I started reading, I couldn't put the book down. I finished it, and it was life-changing. I hear some of those comments as we go along. Another person said, I never read a book twice. But this book I've already read twice, and I'm putting it on my bedroom table because I want to go back to it again and again. I think what is helpful for me about this book, I never knew how it was going to turn out, but there were such wonderful authors who wrote for me that it was like a pick a mix bag. I just put my hand in, and every time something different popped out. We didn't know at the start how this book was going to end, how it's going to end. And it is incredible when you use this book that you can go back to it again and again and find richness in it every next time you look at it again. So I really want to encourage people to purchase this book for yourself and purchase it for somebody that you love as a gift. Chocolates are finished very quickly. Flowers fade in a day or two. We must have flowers. That's part of our well-being. We must have a chocolate sometimes. But consider giving them this more permanent gift, and people will really thank you for that. So next, may I please ask Dr. Tia van der Merwe to speak to us about your take and your ideas about well-being. Thank you, Tia.
Hi, people and guests. I have to tell you a little bit about this book. My friend came up to me and says, would you mind writing a chapter in my book on well-being? Yeah, okay. None of us has seen what the others had written. We all wrote our own chapters and our own stories, and she put it together. And that makes this book so unique, because it is all this geroesmoes of people and stories that actually makes it whole and helps you to understand things. I'm a dark mum and a friend to Erika, and then I'm also a psychiatrist. I've relearned with lockdown about a couple of things, and that is kindness that I wrote about, and that we can be often unkind by not meaning to be unkind, that we can be a bit quick in our lives, a bit haastig, but that kindness is still your best thing. And you also need to not judge. I've realized over and over that you cannot judge other people for what they say or do, because you don't know the background. You don't know the reasons. So that is my big growth this year, is to not judge. I think in the book it says, I each time have a growth, and I had growth into kindness, and then I had growth into happiness. And I think my growth this year is no judgment. It's something that I lived with, but it's something that I have to do more and more. And I think COVID have taught us quite a bit of things, because the things about happiness that I wrote about was almost impossible to do in COVID. Random acts of kindness, if you can just make your family so much cups of coffee, and then exercise was very difficult with lockdown. We didn't have the support of our friends that we could go for a Saturday lunch. We didn't have the support of people that we can walk through at the office. The variety was difficult. I mean, you can just eat so many eggs and meat, and you don't have takeout, and you can't see the world around you. You have your house. But the big thing that we did have was gratitude, and the gratitude for living, and for being where we are, and for surviving, and for able to have food on your plate, a roof over your head. That gratitude became a big part of staying healthy this year. And I think it's something you guys would need to go and think carefully about. What are we thankful for? So much. Thanks, Erika.
Thank you so much, Tia. The person Marinel as a guest asked, what if in a workplace people struggle to show empathy? They turn a blind eye when others are in despair. And Rula, would you mind addressing that for us, please?
I would love to address that, but I do not know if I have the right answer. So I'm sure I believe we do at UJ and what people do at the University of Johannesburg and what I see my students do. So I think I think the best example is to be the example. If other people do not behave as you think they should, or as you want to or would do, you cannot change them. My mother used to say, and I remember for years I thought, how can she say this? My mother used to say, if people think they are better than you, then they are. And then I would fight with her and say, how can you believe that? But underneath that lesson, and it's only after a death that I actually really started understanding what she meant. You cannot change other people. Like Madiba said, you can only change yourself, and through that change in yourself and your own process, you can inspire change in others. So if other people do not have empathy, I say give them a mulligan. The reason they don't have empathy is actually not your concern. But you have the empathy. It's a little bit like bullying. If people are bullied, of course you need to stand up when you can, but you cannot change others. You can only inspire others. So I don't know if that is I mean, you guys all have your PhDs and you all are psychologists. So I don't know if that is in any way a sound response, but that is how I see it happens at my workplaces that I've been in.
I believe there's no answer so good as that which comes from personal experience. I think Karula is telling us, do more and be more of what you want to have, what you want to experience. When you are despondent, there must be those supports in your life, those people that you trust, and that Marlene Arendt so eloquently speaks about in her chapter, and that many of the other authors speak about, to have a wonderful support system, linking back to what Dr. Isanet van Schalkwyk also said about nurturing your relationships, making sure they are there, and you being in your relationships as well, so that there's that reciprocity. Because the minute we are takers only, we create very difficult relationships. That is not part of our well-being and the well-being of those that we are in relationships with. Now, next, I'd like to introduce Jolyn Durant to speak to us about well-being. First, put on your own oxygen mask, and I think that's the best advice in the whole wide world. So, Jolyn, thank you very much for speaking to us today.
Thank you, Erica, and welcome to everyone who has attended today. It is really, really heartening to see so many participants be here today. I'm a psychologist and I work in Cape Town. First, I'm going to focus on two different things. The first thing is just my idea of the book in general, and then I'm going to focus on the specific chapter and what stood out in the chapter for me. So when I got my book, I sat down, and it was the first time in many years that I had the ability to sit from page 1 right up to the last page and read through an entire book. I love books, but I'm not so well disciplined to finish books. I have an entire bookcase with little bookmarks 1/3 of the way through where I go, okay, I get it, I'm so bored. But this book captivated me through the entire book. But what I've decided to do is I've got myself a journal, and I've got the book on my bookshelf, on my bed case every night, and I use it as a workbook. So there's a little day piece every day. So there's so many ideas and so many thoughts in just one paragraph that you can spend days on just one section in the book, and it's still going to be a valuable experience. Particularly the one chapter about putting your own oxygen mask on first. I think for me, the most precious commodity in managing well-being is energy. and being able to manage your own energy. And I talk of energy as the whole shebang, the physical, the psychological, the spiritual energy, all in one. And if we look at nature, then nature balances energy out on the basis of an equal exchange. What I invest in, I need to receive back in an equal quantity. So physically, it's easy to see when I expend more energy than I take in, then exhaustion sets in. Psychologically, it's a bit more difficult to see, but it's still there. So it is being mindfully connected to your own energy meter to know what are the things that take a lot of energy and what are the things that add energy into your system and how much. So it's a basic equation. It is all the pluses minus all the negatives, gives you a well-being score at the end. And my job is to manage that well-being score. So if I look at all the things that take energy, then you've got your obvious things like stress and pressure and all the insanity that we are currently caught up in this pandemic. But you can put your finger on it and it is outside your control. And we all know that we should leave the stuff that we can't control. We can just focus on the things that we do have control over. So the things that psychologically sap our energy are things like living up to expected roles and responsibilities that are not ours. It are things like the rules that we live by, the shoulds and the shouldn'ts and the have tos, and when to be perfect and when is enough, and all those kind of rules. And basically it boils down to when what I am trying to be to the world is my mask that I show on the outside is so far removed from who I am as a person myself, then that saps a tremendous amount of energy. So my job is to get the image to the world and the true self as close together as possible. And one of the things, if we move to the positive side of the equation that is written in the research in this book, is it has to do with living inside your core strengths. And again, it's core values, and it's a general term for what is important to me as a person. What drives my character? What are my heart strengths? Because those are the things that add energy for me. And the closer I can function to that, the less energy is consumed psychologically. So it is about authenticity, basically. So the research shows that the more you live inside your core values, and just as an example, core values for me are, you've got your surface values like honesty and integrity and don't steal people's things, but then you've got core values. And for me, for example, those would be freedom and independence and having meaning in my time spent. The more you function with that authentically, the easier it is to manage your energy. So not only does it take less energy to stay authentic, it also adds energy, because authenticity leads to senses of, or a sense of fulfillment and a sense of satisfaction, and it boosts resilience. And the other interesting thing is living authentically gives you a sense of being engaged in what you do. And currently the research is the opposite of burnout is not energy. The opposite of burnout is being and living fully engaged. So authenticity then prevents burnout, but it also adds into your energy equation. So an interesting quote that I came across said that before you can have, you must first do. But before you can do, you must first be. And that's where this kicks in for me. So when you live closely and very mindfully of your energy meter and you manage it consciously, it becomes easy to do boundaries. It becomes easy to say no, and it becomes easy to put on your own oxygen mask first, because then you understand the difference between selfishness and self-preservation. And if I put my own oxygen mask on first, then I can be so much more for others, because then I live in well-being. So if I can take all of this back full circle to me and my little day pieces every day out of this book, all the content that I just spoke about comes out of a half a page in this book. So take the time and work through this book, because there's a phenomenal wealth of information in every single chapter. So thanks for the opportunity, and I really hope that you enjoy the book. And the last comment is, this is wellness for all. So every bit that you take, it does not necessarily have to relate to the workplace. It can be personal wellness as well. So thanks, Erica. It is an amazing piece of work.
Thank you, Jolyn, and for your very special contribution. When you go to my website, if you order the book, you'll see a little clip by Herman, little video clip. He's an expert on identity, and he links the whole issue of identity to who you are. So what I'd like to say as a last note today is well-being never, ever happens by itself. Well-being is about intentional activity. We sometimes feel that well-being needs to come from the inside out. But I want to confirm for you that science says that well-being can also come from the outside in. So such as putting a smile on your face. Do you know how many neurotransmitters you activate just by smiling? And you create happiness for yourself. You create happiness for the person who looks at your face in that moment. So little things that we address in the book and that you can do, but it is about being intentional. And then a quote that I've learned to savor in my life was a person who said, when we have resilience, and that's part of our well-being, it gives us the option, and that is resilience is like the diving plank of life. When you have resilience, you have the option to spin so many more times when you dive. That sounds like a fun and a wonderful life, a fulfilled life to me. That's what I want to live like. I want to have a few more spins every time that I dive. And I want to continue. I want to continue moving and working and engaging. So the important components of well-being are positive emotions, positive relationships, engagement, and having meaning, something that we live for. So those are the ingredients, but it's not the recipe yet. The recipe is in the book. I want to really, really encourage each of you as guests to link onto the website and order your book today. And I hope that you have so much joy and so much well-being. Could you share with people when you are at home and there's lots of pressures, how you practically go about setting those boundaries? May I ask you to respond to that?
Yes, maybe I should start by linking back to what Ellie said earlier as well. You know, sometimes we're going to get it wrong, and sometimes you're only going to eat cupcakes and you're not going to wear pants. And that's okay, because that too is a decision and it is a boundary. For me, boundaries are about how I can protect the bubble around me so that whatever happens on the outside can bounce off the bubble like a force field. And for that, I need to be okay on the inside of my boundary. I need to work on my own energy levels. I need to work on my self-respect and my self-confidence and my self-acceptance. And if I am solid on the inside of my boundary, then whatever happens on the outside can then just bounce off the force field. So it's back to mindfulness, and it's back to awareness around what are the things that trigger me, what are the things that steal my energy, what are the things that steal my joy, and what are the things that I'm afraid of. And working with those and feeding with those, because then I have solid enough space to keep a boundary up and to keep whatever is happening outside on the outside. Going back to more practical things like keeping work and private life separate. I mean, especially now that in COVID we have to work from home, it's easy to, while you're working, quickly put in a load of washing, or while you're at home, you're quickly answering a phone call. Going back to routines and having strong boundaries just means having a structure. It is leaving work at work, closing the door, not answering the phone, not being at work at 8 o'clock at night, closing the door at 5, and then focusing mindfully 100% on what I'm busy with right now. And that takes a bit of practice, especially when there is chaos on the outside. So I think it starts with me on the inside first, and being well, and understanding that there is no such thing as selfish unless you are stepping on people. You need to understand what self-preservation is rather than selfishness. I hope that answers the question.
In my life with boundaries, I sometimes ask the simple question, can I do this? Do I want to do this? And is it good for me and the next person? My husband often says he's not a heart surgeon, he's a CA. So if somebody's heart is not stopping now, or if somebody else's bad planning puts pressure on you, think about it. Help other people to learn boundaries as well, so that there's not consistent crises and you have to run around and, have havoc in your life. So look after your boundaries. They are precious things. One of the most precious boundaries we can teach our children is the word no. We don't stop liking people when we say no, and very often they don't stop liking us. And we've always got to remember that that is a reality. The word harmony also shows its face many times in the book, and I'd love for you to have a look at what we say about peace and harmony and how to accomplish that for ourselves. I would often say we care for our cars very carefully. We wouldn't try and drive on empty, especially or except if we are risky people, and we try and see how little fuel we can keep in our tanks and still keep going. Normally, if we want to feel safe and we want to feel secure and we want to know that we're going to end up on the other side, we keep our fuel tanks relatively full of our cars, that is. But when it comes to our own well-being, our own emotions, our own mental health, how is it that we are prepared to run on empty and then still want to give out of that emptiness to others? So there I come back to Jolin's talk again of first put on your own oxygen mask. Learn self-compassion. You're a human being too. I think my joy in life started when I wholeheartedly could accept myself, warts and all, and laugh, have humor, and enjoy who you are. That is part of well-being. All right, so our last speaker has joined.
Working on identity, which is really a passion for me, and linking it to well-being. And just, Erika, the little bit that I've heard from what you've said now, um, about looking after yourself. So for me, well-being starts with yourself. And I think sometimes we rate ourselves as second best. And we are not second best. We should come first, and not in a selfish way. That's not what I mean at all. But we are not second best. So why do we allow us to be in circumstances that are second best, that does not really show us what our potential is and what we can do? And if we are in an environment where well-being is not being seen as a priority, then what do we do about it? And I think that's what I want to get to. It's about responsibility. What responsibility do I take for my situation in the workplace? What do I do for myself to enhance my well-being? Because no one else may do it for me. And if we wait for other people to do it for us, to change our environment, to make it nice, to make it better, we may not get there. So what do we do to make it better? And what resources do we have? Um, because it's not only about ourselves. We are linked to friends and families and nature and animals. So what resources do we use to make it better for ourselves and to make our environment better for ourselves? Because I acknowledge sometimes we are in workplaces where it's really not nice. But then we have to make the decision. Am I going to stay here, or am I going to do something about it? And what can I do? What resources do I have so I can move forward? So that I do not stay in the cycle of going on and on and on. I have to start a new cycle, a well-being cycle, a cycle where I look after myself, because when I'm good, I will be good for my family and my friends. But when I'm on the bad place, it's also not good for the people around me. So I think my little contribution would be, stop being second best. We are not second best. And well-being starts with us, with no one else. It starts with us. Thank you.
Herman, thank you so much. So in the book, in Tia's chapter, but every person I think refers to kindness as well. It's about having practices such as gratitude, paying a kind visit, saying thank you, and how good that makes you feel and how good it makes the other person feel. I always say, how would you know when you get there if you didn't know where you were heading to? So that is incredibly important. This is my last note for today, and it's about what we call the negativity bias. And it links to what Herman has said about looking after yourself and not being second best. Very often we would prepare a meal for people, guests would come over, and two people might say, wow, this was fantastic. One person would just stay quiet, and we might link ourselves onto the person who stayed quiet and continue our thinking as though the evening was not a success, we are not a good friend, we are not a good cook, people don't like us. That is what we call the negativity bias. I write about that in our book as well, and how to overcome that, because being like that certainly doesn't help us in our search and our embracing of our own well-being. My website address is available. If you want to get hold of any one of the panelists, if you want to speak to me, please let me know. We are people who open ourselves to others, and we are so willing to listen to what you want to say about your own well-being and if you have further questions. So I celebrate each and every person. You're a human being, you're wonderful just the way you were made, and I hope that all of us will grow in our well-being from here and continue to understand that it's a day-by-day thing. It's not something that we've achieved. We are always in process of achieving. And this is to your continuous work of achieving your well-being.